So that you're essentially saying here that probably the most partisan, divisive political votes are those on tax matters frequently.
Yep.
And in this case, people were sitting down with the governor and the legislative leadership and saying, okay, now we're not going to let this become a partisan issue. We're going to figure out a way to...
And the quadrant meetings, so-called, because the majority and minority leader of each party in each house would meet with the governor regularly. And we would discuss
Was that
all
when you
these
started the quadrant
Yep.
meetings?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And this, I think, played a great role in solving problems. And we had 2 or 3 executive orders during these times as well.
When the governor would say we need to, in order to balance the budget, make across-the-board decision to cut programs.
And we didn't have much of a problem with that. I think the first time he sent us an executive order and we just rejected it. You know, said, no, that's not it. After that, it was a negotiating process of putting the executive order together. So when it came to the floor, it pretty much was ready to pass because a lot of negotiations had gone into the process. He didn't just send it to us and say, "Here it is."
Right.
That you know you're gonna take it, and but the thing about it, an executive order was you couldn't amend it. It was take it or leave it. So we got into the negotiation process with that, and we didn't run into any problems after that. We ran into a problem once. This is a little aside. We had all the votes for the tax to pass at this time. We passed two taxes during my time as Speaker. We had all the votes. All the Democrats were on the floor. We put a call of the House in. One of the
Call of the House means?
Call of the House means everybody comes in and they go out and get you, you know, the state police or whomever, sergeant at arms, whatever, to bring you in. Then the doors are locked and you can't leave. So we put the call of the House on, and there was one Republican missing. And one of my sergeant at arms says, "I know where he is. He's over at the Jack Tar in room so-and-so."
And Jack Tar is the hotel
across the street. So I tell the governor, I said, "Your vote is over there." He said, "Well, what do you think we should do?" I said, "If he was my Democrat, I'd go over and get him." The governor marched across the street with a state policeman, got him and brought him back. Meantime, of course, we were standing at ease. The board was open for a few hours while we put all the votes together. But he went over and got him and brought him over, and we passed the vote. But this is the kind of thing. I respected Bill Milliken because he was a man of his word. He wanted to accomplish something, not just get a political handle on something like a John Engler. I have no problem saying that. And so you didn't have to go back. Once you reached an agreement with him, you didn't have to go back every 15 minutes and say, "How we doing? Is this okay?" We only had 2 kind of major problems in those 8 years that I was Speaker.
You and Governor
Me and Bill Milliken. And that was PBB. That was when the fire retardant got mixed with cattle food. And there had been some mislabeling and all kinds of things occurred, and nobody was taking blame and everybody was pointing fingers. So I assigned a staff member, Edie Clark, because she was very interested in it. She got in contact with Dr. Sokoloff, who was a person who was very knowledgeable in this area, brought him in, and we finally nailed it down that somebody in the Farm Bureau, I think it was, had mixed this stuff in, and thousands of cattle had to be killed. Thousands of cattle had to be killed and buried as a result of this. Otherwise, the beef from Michigan was null and void. I mean, there was no selling or anything else. And Dave Dempsey, in his book, claimed that I tried to use this as a political thing against the governor.
This is Dempsey's book.
On the governor. Of Bill Milliken. He didn't talk to me. He called me. I tried to get back with him. We never did get contact. So it wasn't political. It was something that we had to get to the bottom of. And I had a good staff member who did that. And, but Milliken thought, you know, they convinced him, somebody, that this was all a political thing. And so we had a problem on that. The other problem we had was on rules and regulations. When we passed legislation, it goes to the department where they promulgate rules and regulations to implement the legislation. And there was the law was that if there was 45 days expired, you know, they could pass them, and we didn't get a look at them.
So the department could just say, here are the rules.
Here are the rules and regulations, and you weren't here during this 45 days. 45 days has passed, and you're not in session.
And those rules have the effect of law.
They really do. They really do. So what they would do is they would stockpile them for 15, 20 days or so, and then we'd be out of session for 30 days. The 45 days would cook in, and they would kick them out by the drove. So we passed legislation to set up a oversight committee on rules and regulations. The governor vetoed it. I tried to talk. I said, look, it's us against them. I said, we passed legislation. You sign it. They change the legislative intent with their rules and regulations. But once again, somebody had convinced him, I think, at that point, that we were encroaching on the executive branch's power. So he vetoed it. And so it came down, and I was a little chagrined about it, because this was, I thought, was a very important point, that you do not allow bureaucracy to legislate through the rules and regulations that they promulgate, and that's what they were doing. So it came down, it was on the calendar, a message from the governor, veto. So word got around that I had been talking to some Republicans, and that we might try to override the veto. So Dennis Cawthorn, the minority leader at the time, called a caucus. The governor came in and he questioned each and every one of them. Of course, they didn't have everybody there. I had 6 commitments that I needed from Republicans. But they were convinced at that point, because of that caucus, that we no longer had the votes. So Cawthorn came down from the caucus with a big smile and said, I think we got that taken care of. That irritated me a little bit, so I began to call my 6 Republicans that previously had committed. 4, yes. 5, yes. I finally found the 6th one. And he says, oh, yeah, I'm still there. So I looked at Joe Forbes, the majority leader, and I said, let's go to messages from the governor on the calendar. He said, what's happening? I said, we're going to override the veto. So he goes to messages from the governor. Cawthorn looks and says, what's going on? I said, well, you know, you have to give it a shot. So I tell McNeely, who's the Speaker Pro Tem, tell me when we got the votes up there.
Matt McNeely.
Matt McNeely is the Speaker Pro Tem. He's in the chair at the time. So they get the votes, pow! The override comes. And that's the first one in 50 years, probably, and hadn't been one since. And since they overrode something with Soapy back in the, late 40s, early 50s. And the governor is very, very, very distraught about this. He gets in his car, as I understand, and screams out of the parking lot. They have T-shirts, the dirty half dozen, and all this kind of thing that they make up about the Republicans. They go through a little charade for a while. They'd take a typewriter or a secretary or something over. Finally, I get to Cawthorn and I say, that's enough, no more, or I'll be your personnel officer, and you will not fare well. But that's the only 2 incidences, the PBB and the rules and regulations, that we really had a problem over. I still respect him. We had breakfast in Traverse City about a year ago or so for an hour and a half, and reminisced about old times and everything. Still a great guy. I still like him.